Well, welcome to the podcast. I'm Marcy Markusa, and this is where we don't waste your time. And in 20 minutes or less, we get you into all kinds of topics that affect your life in this province that we live, love, and call home. Today, we have a lot of topics to cover, especially if you live in the city of Winnipeg. This is Manitoba. And that is because every month we have the opportunity to talk to the mayor of the city of Winnipeg about a variety of topics. And we have a lot on our plates. Mayor Scott Gillingham joins us on the podcast and begins with news about a trip he's about to take down south. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Marcy.
So we're talking tariffs. You are also heading south to speak to U.S. mayors, I understand, about a conference about the impact of tariffs through a civic lens. What are you hoping to share there?
Really hoping to, help mayors in the U.S. understand that tariffs and counter-tariffs have a negative impact ultimately on our local businesses. And so where this plays out is it really plays out in cities. And this is about protecting jobs and paychecks in our cities. Canada and the U.S. have a great partnership, a great trading partnership, but any tariffs and counter-tariffs ultimately drive up the cost for consumers of products. And so we really want to make sure that we're kind of on the same page here and can have a good dialogue on the impacts of tariffs and counter-tariffs in our respective cities.
What are you most worried about in Winnipeg, and what are you hearing at City Hall? Are you getting? Are you in business conversations? Are you in the jobs conversations from a civic point of view?
We are, and in fact, later this morning, we're going to have a council seminar for all councillors who have been invited to really understand the impacts of tariffs and counter-tariffs on specifically local businesses and what sectors in Winnipeg may be most impacted. And so we're going to have our own staff who've done some analysis on the impact, and also going to invite some other guests from the Chamber and Economic Development Winnipeg just to talk about what sectors may be most negatively impacted. And I have been talking to leaders in the aerospace industry, agriculture, advanced manufacturing, and many of them are worried because there's no doubt that a 25% tariff on their products will have a big impact.
We've also been in conversations here at CBC. I have personally with some of those same folks. And to say that people are being careful right now is, it's probably an understatement. A lot of people are just, every one step at a time, right? One day at a time here. I just on a last question on this, though, as you are heading south, there are going to be some U.S. cities that will say they could benefit if Donald Trump's plan works out and more manufacturing jobs eventually land in the U.S. or developed there. And they might ask, what's the incentive for U.S. mayors to fight against the tariffs? How will you position that? Or what will your response be to that kind of a sentiment?
Well, I think, look at Minnesota as a prime example. Agriculture producers in Minnesota that rely on Saskatchewan and potash that comes out of Saskatchewan and Manitoba as fertilizer, their costs of input for farmers is going to go up. And so that's going to make a difference at the end of the day in the cost of food and fuel. And so really the impacts of tariffs on fuel and on food is going to really, be across the board, and people are going to see it, no matter what state they're in. And so I think we have to understand that, yes, there may be some positive impact, a few more jobs at a steel manufacturing plant, perhaps in Indiana. But at the end of the day, across the board, it's more cost and more negative impact on more individuals.
13 minutes to 8 o'clock. We're live with Mayor Scott Gillingham, who's with us this morning for our monthly interview. I want to switch topics here. EPC Executive Policy Committee voted yesterday to secure the the federal funding for the North End sewage treatment plant upgrades. Can you help our listeners understand what that means, why it's critical? I know I'm loading you with questions here, but this is leading me to try to understand something, because this is tied to the funding that we got from the feds or will get for housing. So can you help us understand this issue and what you're worried about with this funding?
The federal government committed $150 million to help fund the North End sewage treatment plant, which is an ongoing project that we have not got fully funded yet. So this money is really, really critical. And yes, they have put conditions on getting this money. And part of the conditions is that the City of Winnipeg will comply with and really fulfill all of our agreement and obligation on the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is a different fund of money. that goes towards building housing. One of the conditions on the Housing Accelerator Fund is that we, as a city, permit fourplexes, 4 units as of right, across the city. We're working towards that. There's a public hearing that's going to come up on that in the coming months. But this $150 million is so vital because what it's about building the North End plan, and we need that North End sewage plan built so that we have the capacity in the city of Winnipeg to build more housing, to build more businesses.
And if I can interject, Mayor Gillingham, why have they tied the two together if they're separate funds?
This is not uncommon because they've tied the housing funding also to transit funding. What governments, the federal government really wants to see is more housing built because we know we need more housing built across Canada. Right now we have a vacancy rate of less than 2% in Winnipeg, and so it's really hard to find even an apartment. We need to get more housing built and get it built quickly. Even the leader of the official opposition, Pierre Poilievre, has, even as recently as yesterday, has talked about finding ways to force cities to get more housing built faster. So this $150 million for the North End plan is critical. We need the funds. What that will do also is help us with any future sewer rate proposals, because if we can get more money from federal and provincial government, then it will have it means that the people of Winnipeg will have to pay less on their sewer rates compared to what they would have to if there was no federal and provincial funding.
So I want to ask you two additional questions on this file. So one of them is you brought up Pierre Poilievre. We could have a new party change in the new federal election this year. If the funding is not fully secured by the election, what's your concern around that? Because despite what Pierre Poilievre might have said that you're quoting there, we know he said he would get rid of the accelerator fund.
The concern about the $150 million, I'll go to the $150 million for the North End plant. If we do not get funding from senior levels of government to help us fund that plant, then the city of Winnipeg, ratepayers would have to pay a lot more in the sewer rates.
Which you said, but how concerned are you that Poilievre's going to cut the Housing Accelerator Fund, though, to look at that fund?
Yeah, I'm concerned because we need more housing built, and this has been working. In fact, just last week we announced another round of projects that will get built with the Housing Accelerator Fund. In the city of Winnipeg, we've announced over 2,000 units, I think 2,500 units will get built through the Housing Accelerator Fund. That's housing that we need critically. What the Housing Accelerator Fund has done is it's really incentivized developers to build. In fact, our $58 million announcement last week leverages $1.6 billion in construction. And so this is very important funding to get the housing built that we need in the city of Winnipeg right now.
Now, are all the councillors on board? Because it's my understanding that some of them have concerns about the zoning issues that we were talking about, because the funds are tied now to the housing thing, and the build a housing, we have to comply with zoning rules from the feds. And if they're not on board, what would you say to them?
I would say get on board. We can't risk the $150 million that has been put on the table by the federal government. That's critical funding, and not only the funding from the federal government, but the provincial government also is already come on board with $30 million, and the premier has said, he's looking to find ways to add more to that fund, because for the premier, he has indicated, that I believe him, that the North End plan is also his priority, as it is ours. So we can't risk having that money disappear and asking ratepayers to pay the full shot on their sewer rates.
But if they're not on board because they're worried about zoning, do they have a legitimate concern about that? Because when you and I first talked about the stipulations attached to this federal funding for housing, I know you had said that we can't leave federal money on the table, but we can't fall behind at our cities, but we're going to find a Winnipeg solution to this because the requirements that they were imposing on us, you said, are actually in some ways broad, not a lot of specificity. So I guess what I'm leading to is, should people be worried that, yes, we need the funding for the North End treatment plant tied to the housing funding, but if we just say yes, yes, yes very quickly, we're going to lose some of that ability to have a made in Winnipeg solution, and we're going to have, we're going to have increased density in places where maybe neighborhoods or Winnipeggers don't want it.
Yeah, so we're not saying yes, yes, yes quickly. This has been an ongoing and continues to be an ongoing back and forth dialogue with the province, with the federal government and CMHC. There is a hearing coming up, and a hearing is, a public hearing where the public can have input, and we're trying to find ways that will satisfy, as many councillors as possible and mitigate some of the concerns that that some councillors have, and some concerns that I have as well. I think we're well on the way to finding some of those solutions, but there is a public hearing. I think that's important. This is not something that we're just, what the federal government says we do without asking any questions. And so that public hearing is coming up in June. Okay.
I want to move to another story here. I want to ask you about the police chief. It's been over 5 months since Danny Smyth's last day as Winnipeg's police chief. Why is it taking so long to find a replacement? What would you say to Winnipeggers who are wondering about that?
Well, I'll echo what the police board chair, as a spokesperson, Councillor Marcus Chambers, has said, is that the board is doing its due diligence, a very thorough process. As we are getting through the process, there has been information that has come to the board that the board is looking at and looking at very seriously. And so I would remind Winnipeggers that we do have an acting chief. Art Standard right now is serving in that capacity, and police services are continue to be delivered really without interruption.
What's the expected timeline now, though? Can you give us a sense of this? Because it was initially at the end of last year.
I don't have a timeline. I'm obviously as a mayor of this city, I'm hoping it's soon. I'm hoping it's sooner rather than later. But I don't have a timeline. But I can tell you that the board is taking matters very seriously and doing its due diligence.
Let's move to the Granite Curling Club. There was movement on that story this week. There's a proposal, the parking lots developed into affordable housing under the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund, which we just discussed at length. Where are you sitting with that? Because we heard from Daniel Leonard, one of 70 Granite members. He signed a petition supporting the project, so there is some support. But we also have heard from Club Secretary Christian Fierce, who said that they want to work together with you, purchase the property. They want funds, revenue sharing from whatever's built on the lot. So where is that project at?
Yesterday at the Executive Policy Committee, we approved the subdivision and rezoning. And that's really the first step, is to subdivide and rezone that land so that the curling club can remain. And I want to just reiterate that strongly, that I believe there will be curling at the Granite Curling Club for many, many, many years to come. And so we want to make sure that curling continues. But on the lot that is beside the curling club, there's a possibility there for multifamily development. And so that's what this rezoning permits, is it would permit some multifamily development. As far as the concern related to parking, there was a proposal yesterday as part of an amendment to what we voted on, to have our city staff work with the curling club and area landowners to find the solution to accommodate the parking and to deal with the concerns that club members have.
Can Granite share revenue from that building to help with club maintenance? Is that a firm offer?
Well, that would be something separate from what we decided yesterday, and that would really be part of any discussion on a new lease or updating the lease. But that all is, I think, possible as part of the discussions, but that's a separate matter.
They've criticized the city and you, Mr. Mayor. Why do you, for transparency, they're saying it's lacking. Why do you think they feel transparency is lacking?
I don't know. Our staff has been talking to them for months now, so I don't know why they would say that. But at the end of the day, I know our staff has been in dialogue with the curling club folks since the summer. So if they have questions to be asked, then they can for sure ask the questions, and our staff will get them the information.
Thank you very much for being on the program this morning. If you want to slide in our last 30 seconds, I know that after 8 o'clock, we are still continuing our, we're going to announce the winner of our Show Us Your Winter contest. How do you survive this cold stuff?
Oh, a warm coat, layers, and I still try to get out and walk once in a while, even in these temperatures. And I know many people enjoyed Festival. We enjoyed Festival over the weekend. It was a great time, even in the cold. It's good to get out and get moving.
Good luck with your trip down south. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
That is the mayor of the city of Winnipeg, Scott Gillingham. And we have opportunity on our morning radio show, Information Radio on 89.3 FM, to speak with him each and every month. So if you have ideas for what you would like us to discuss with the mayor of the city of Winnipeg, you can always reach us at radio893@cbc.ca. Well, it was by email, actually, that we found our next guest. We're turning our attention to a story about school absenteeism in Winnipeg. We talked to the Winnipeg School Division Superintendent Matt Henderson recently because they've just wrapped up a year pilot project in their schools to try and help people with getting students back in class. And that's parents and teachers and taking different approaches because we were having challenges every week to deal with chronic absenteeism. Well, one of the things that we heard was that there were individual things that were happening at the school level that were really having an impact in getting kids back to school. And we got an email from someone saying you should check out Brenna Frith. She works in the Transcona River East School Division. She was the principal of Hampstead Elementary School for a time, and she came tasked with the job to get kids back in class. So typically when we think about truancy, your mind might go to a teenager or high schools, but Brenna says it's also an issue for younger kids. Earlier this year, she left her role as principal of Hampstead. She now has a new assignment, but she says during her time at the school, they saw a huge boost in attendance. So what did they do? Here's my conversation about it with Brenna Frith. Good morning, Brenna.
Good morning, Marcy.
I'll try to speak clearly from here on in. I don't know what's going on with me today. So when you were at Hampstead principal, paint a picture before we talk solutions. What was attendance looking like when you first became principal?
Well, I became principal at Hampstead during COVID. So they had made tons of gains with attendance prior to that. But during COVID, of course, kids were staying home. And as we came out of COVID, there were challenges in getting kids back into the building, back on routine, back engaged with their education. So we needed to start looking at what the issues were and how we could get our students back into the school. There was lots of challenges, that's for sure. And there still are.
If I interject there, Brenna, then what was step one of looking into why it was happening? Did you talk to the kids or the families? Like, how do you even approach that how do you approach that? Because it can be sensitive, right?
Yeah, it starts with looking at our data, figuring out who specifically, what populations are not attending, and then talking to the students. But in elementary, it's especially important talking to the families. Making sure that we understand what those barriers are so that we can put a targeted approach in place that is authentic and purposeful for the community that attends the school.
And so what did you do?
We did a lot of things. We looked at our issue. We looked at our resources. We found that the mornings, obviously, were the biggest challenge. So we altered our school day a little bit to begin every day with play, purposeful play. We called it discovery time. So students had voice and choice in how they started each and every day with a preferred activity that would allow for our staff a gentler approach into the day so that we could focus on relationship building and really meet kids where they're at when they walk through that door. You're never quite sure what happened when they were at home overnight, and it's just about making sure we're ready for them when they arrive.
Just to revisit some specifics here, why was attendance such an issue? Like, what were you hearing? What was specific to the student population when you were exploring this?
Well, it's so multifaceted attendance and so family specific, but we looked at things like mental health, safety in the community. Some families were feeling a lack of a sense of belonging in the building, that school wasn't for them or their families and their communities weren't represented authentically in the building. Backgrounds that included trauma, physical illness, and of course, coming out of COVID, we were hypersensitive to any cough or sneeze or physical illness. Food scarcity, housing insecurity, transient community. It's so multifaceted, and that's why it needs to be such a big approach across all the school divisions and with partnering with provinces and outside agencies to really get this under control.
How does truancy in elementary school differ from truancy in high school, in your view?
Well, I actually did the majority of my career in a high school, and I spent lots of time working with students in breaking down barriers to get them in the door. Lots and lots of conversations, more with the students than with the families. In elementary school, it becomes about partnering and walking us alongside the families to make sure that they know that school is a safe place. School is where we can help their children succeed. Every family wants their child to be safe, come to school, to work towards success, whatever that might look like for the family. And it's about letting them know that we're there to partner with them to help their children succeed.
You started a walking school bus, I understand, and you started to have nutrition play a larger role. Can you elaborate on those two initiatives and how they worked?
Absolutely. The walking school bus was actually established before I got to Hampstead, but we were able to expand it even recently through the work of the River East Transcona School Division Attendance Committee. We were able to pilot an expanded program of the walking school bus. So we have a youth care worker at Hampstead School that runs the walking school bus, and she goes through the community every morning, knocking on doors, greeting families, greeting students, and picking them up as they do their walking bus route back to school. With the expansion of her role, we were able to add multiple runs of the school bus. So if students aren't quite ready first thing in the morning, she can go back and pick them up later. We added a home route to the walking school bus too, which is very helpful. Many of our families are concerned, and rightly so, about safety in the community and having their children arrive to school safely and home safely. So that was one of our biggest barriers, and this expanded walking school bus was really able to help with that.
What was the end result of your various initiatives? How big of an improvement was there in attendance?
Well, we saw a significant improvement, that's for sure. We had many of our students that were absent 30 to 40% of the school year, which is extremely concerning. We would hope that students would miss no more than 5 days a school year. So we were looking at upwards to 30, 40, 50 days of the school year. And we were able to cut that back significantly. I would say that we increased our attendance rates at least 20%.
Wow, that's a really big. It's really saying something. What advice would you give to either a school or a parent struggling with getting their kids to school?
For parents, I would say to reach out to your school. Every single school in River East Transcona School Division, and I'm sure across the province, have initiatives in place to help students get to school regularly and safely so that they can be as successful as possible. There's so many resources that schools have access to: warm clothing, with the increase of nutrition dollars. At Hampstead, we were able to offer breakfast, snacks, lunch every day for all of our students. And that can be a real help to families as they struggle, maybe paycheck to paycheck, to put food on the table and to pay those bills. It's a burden that schools can help carry for families. So I would say definitely reach out to the school. We're here to help, and we want your kids at school every single day.
Thank you very much for telling us about the success you have with the initiatives, and really appreciate you being on the program this morning early. Thank you.
Yes, no problem. Thank you.
That's Brenna Frith. She's the former principal of Hampstead Elementary School and the current principal, by the way, of Valley Gardens Middle School. Well, This is Manitoba for the podcast today. I'm Marcy Markusa. Thank you so much for tuning in, and don't forget to like and share.